once again to the Statesman podcast. My name is Swat, and it's an interesting time again for us to look at some of the pressing issues as we head towards the 2023 elections. Today, we'll look at the question: what should be the most pressing issues that the candidates need to focus on? September is just around the corner, and the campaigns will open very, very soon. But before then, of course, I know that many Nigerians have been following the utterances of some of the major candidates, the Atiku Abubakar, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, Peter Obi, and well, some others that we don't get to hear so much from them. But then I'll be asking this question: what should be the major issues in view of where we are right now? And then heading towards 2023, what should we be addressing? What would Nigerians really want to hear the candidates address now, and even, pending when the campaign starts properly? And joining me this afternoon, or this time, so to speak, is Osei Aneni. He's a hotelier, he's a politician, and he's an analyst. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining me.
Glad to be here.
All right. So, like I asked, or like I said, I don't know if you've been observing, the utterances of some of the major candidates.
Yeah.
Some of them are practically quiet, so to speak. But we know that we've been hearing some of the candidates, Atiku Abubakar, Peter Obi, say a couple of things about the state of the nation. I know that there are key issues right now in Nigeria, and part of them are insecurity, the inflation rate, or the economy, so to speak, that is on a downward spiral, and a whole lot of issues. Now, as an observer, as a politician, I mean, what would you say that you've heard so far that has either impressed you or not impressed you from the candidates? Let's start on that note.
So I think with a lot of countries, you get crisis that sort of tips the nation over the edge. So in some countries, I think it was Greece the other time, where they had economic issues with debt and inflation.
Yeah.
Some other countries might be insecurity. Some countries it might be unemployment. Nigeria is blessed to have all sectors in crisis almost.
Blessed. Wow.
Blessed.
Yeah, I get it.
And I think how we are able to survive. So we have record levels of inflation and food inflation.
Oh, yes.
We have record levels of unemployment. I think youth unemployment is about 45%.
Yeah.
We are our debt levels exceed revenue right now. I mentioned insecurity. We have terrorists to the northeast, bandits in the northwest, secessionists in
The
the
Southeast.
southeast. We have farmer header crisis in the middle belt. We have militants in the Niger Delta. So you have security crises all over the country. And like I said, any one of these issues in a normal country could have pushed it over the edge. We have internally large
Displaced persons.
internally displaced people's population, one of the largest in Africa.
Yeah.
But I say blessed because Nigeria is also blessed in our diversity. And I think it's this diversity that allows us sort of like continue to, struggle through, and appear to overcome all these individual crises.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, things seem to be coming to a head. We really haven't, as a nation, come to this point where you're having a state of emergency in almost every sector. Even when we had the Civil War, it wasn't as bad as this.
Yeah.
So literally the 2023 elections are almost like make and break elections for Nigeria, because it's at that point we decide as a nation whether we want to fail or whether we want to get on the path of peace, progress, and prosperity. So to answer your question directly, is the first thing I'll ask is which of the candidates recognizes this fact that we are, facing an existential crisis.
Yeah.
And I think, just hearing, even though campaigns haven't started, just hearing from the candidates speak, at platforms or seminars or conferences or wherever they are,
Yeah.
I think the only candidate that has articulated the problems clearly is Waziri Atiku Abubakar.
Okay, so let me just interject a bit there. The candidates are known for, or let's take it from that angle. Some of the candidates are known for major things that they harp on. A Peter Obi candidate, for example, keeps talking about how he intends to change the consumption or Nigeria from a consumption country or heavily dependent import country to a country that would start producing. And maybe that would in some way affect the economy, because when you look at other countries and what they've done to turn around the fortunes of their own economy, so Peter Obi is quite big on that. Bola Ahmed Tinubu, for example, is actually he is actually someone who is quite famous for his tax reforms in Lagos State. And then Atiku Abubakar, of course, a lot of people say he was part of the Obasanjo administration that did well economically and
Yeah.
had some of the best hands on deck, that contributed in making the economy a very good one that grew at a very, very good average, so to speak. So, I mean, these are some of the things that we can say these candidates have come to represent to many Nigerians. But as outside of that, I don't know. Do you see anything different, or do you want to add to all of
I,
that?
I sort of disagree.
Okay.
Because, and people need to understand that we are entering campaign period.
Period, yeah.
So people will, try to present themselves in the best light possible.
Yeah.
So let's x-ray Peter Obi's consumption to production
Yes.
message, for instance. The good thing about our politicians, I always talk about their track record, either in the public sector or in the private sector. Peter Obi is a trader. I don't think he has a farm or a factory that actually produces anything. He has built his wealth on literally selling imported goods. He is one of the largest Heinz distributors, as he famously says. So when you have a candidate saying he wants to build a productive economy, but is in his own personal life, he hasn't shown an appetite or an aptitude to actually produce or manufacture or create wealth in that way, you sort of start sensing that maybe this is just campaign messaging. You talked about tax reforms and Bola Ahmed Tinubu.
Yes.
And we can again just look at away from his statements, look at what has happened in Lagos, where Lagos has become a prosperous state for a very small minority of the elite in Lagos. So Lagos sort of is like, on one hand, one of the largest economies as a state in Africa.
In Africa, yeah.
But it's also one of the poorest as well. It's one of the most deprived, one of the dirtiest, one of the unsafe. So you have Lagos, it's a state that is actually two states, one for the rich and one for the poor. So when you talk about tax reforms in Lagos, you widen tax nets and you tax the whole city to literally serve the interests and pockets of a very small minority. For instance, you have a company like Alpha Beta, which has been linked directly to Bola Ahmed Tinubu, which was written into the laws of Lagos that they were supposed to be the ones collecting some type of tax. And if citizens hadn't protested, then they would have become officially, legally, the tax collectors of Lagos State. So when you have a man who has shown that, yes, he might be big on tax reform, but to what end? Is it to develop the state, or is it to serve private interests? And then I can very easily then pivot to my candidate, Waziri Atiku, who led, like you said, the largest economic revival in Nigeria when he was head of the economic management team and also chairman of the National Council on Privatization. In 2002, Nigeria's GDP was about 15.3. That's the highest we ever had. And it was under his leadership. We saw reforms like the liberalization of the telecom sector, of banking, and the expansion, literally, of Nigeria's GDP to the point where we became one of the largest economies in the world based off policies that he had drawn up himself, based off an economic plan and a team he assembled to, again, push Nigeria from the darkness of military rule. And people need to remember that when Nigeria came in, when democracy came in 1999, we're transitioning from military rule to civilian rule. So we were almost as financially bankrupt as we are now. We have a man who was part of, because I don't want to say he did it all, he was the vice president of Obasanjo, but he did play a significant role in reforming and revamping our economy.
Okay.
And it's important that, like I said, I started by talking about an ability to assess what the problem is so that you can prefer solutions. Even though we have problems with our economy, even though we have problems with insecurity and unemployment, the only candidate that has recognized that we are a divided nation is Atiku. And he recognizes that unless we come together as one united nation, we cannot solve any of these problems. So his 5-point manifesto talks about not just restructuring, not just education, not just the economy. It also talks about uniting this nation. That literally is the first item on his 5 point
in view
agenda.
of where we are right now in the country,
In view of where we are
there
right
is
now.
serious division. Well, let's talk about the insecurity issue. I mean, insecurity is a big thing right now. In fact, some people say it's an industry. I mean, when you look at how kidnappers actually ask for ransom, some people say it has now become like a thriving industry for some, and a lot of theories about some compromise within the security system and all of that. We've seen instances where some of the candidates are asked about their strategy. For example, one of the aides or one of the APC members who was on a certain TV program was asked, and he just went on and on about how they have great plans for Nigeria. But seriously, this is an issue that is very important and key for Nigerians. We need to know that we're going to have a Nigeria where there is security, where we can travel on the roads, where you're not going to sleep with your one of your eye open, like some of people say you sleep with one eye closed and one eye open because you're not sure of what's happening. Have you heard anything that's really impressed you so far in terms of insecurity?
I think
for security of
I
Nigeria?
think all the candidates have tried to share their opinions on security.
Yeah.
I remember Bola Ahmed Tinubu talking about 50 million Agbado army that he was going to
Oh yeah, that's
that he was going to assemble to fight insecurity. I mean, we can dismiss it outhand that that's not Nigeria's problem. You've heard Peter Obi speak, in passing. I don't think he had really been able to articulate a way.
He said he has had to say that we don't want to reveal it.
No, but-
it's not
but-
something they want to reveal or something.
But Nigerians need to lean very heavily on past history. In 2015, we had a presidential candidate who didn't speak to Nigerians, who didn't, tell us what his plans were. And we've seen literally the darkest period of Nigeria's history because we elected a president who had no plans. So you cannot tell me that, your answer to insecurity when we ask you is you can't reveal it. Because my candidate article has revealed it, and it's very simple. It's the fact that away from whatever threats we might be facing, whether it's Islamic terrorism, whether it's militancy in Niger Delta, whatever it is, he has recognized that our security architecture is flawed. That's where it starts from. And the only way to tackle it is to rejig or to restructure that security architecture, to devolve powers from the states, from the center to the states. So, he's very, very big. Literally, he's the only one who is saying that once he gets into power, he will push for state police so that every single state can put together a state police force to address local policing matters, while the army then focuses on their core mandate of protecting Nigeria's territorial integrity and fighting terrorism. So he has a very clear plan of what he wants to do when he gets into office. These are not plans that you cannot share with the people, but it does show at least an understanding of what the problems are. Our police forces undermanned and understaffed, as is our military, and so you tackle and retrain all of that. But you also need to devolve powers to the state so that they can tackle their own peculiar security challenges. That clearly is a man with a plan. And when I talk about my candidate's policy plans, I almost feel like I'm doing myself a disservice because he literally is the only person who has put out a manifesto and policy documents that Nigerians can x-ray and debate. So we can spend hours talking about the pros and cons of Atiku's plan, but we can't talk about Peter Obi's because he has no document I can look at. We can't talk about Tinubu because he put one out in May and then withdrew it. So we can't even talk about plans. We can't manage it. We can only speak to anecdotes and sound bites that we heard him say or heard them talk about on radio, on television. And I don't think going into what I've described as make or break election, that's good enough.
All right. Let me ask you, I mean, you've talked eloquently about an Atiku Abubakar, but right now it seems the frenzy is for a Peter Obi candidate. And when you go on social media, some people say it's a social media thing, but do you think Nigerians are seeing it from your own perspective? Do you think they are listening to the issues, or they are just blinded by sentiments about having a change from the APC PDP? Because you hear that a whole lot, that lexicon, we're tired of the APC, we're tired of the PDP, we need something new. So are we listening for the issues? Are we open to those issues, or is it just a change that Nigerians are desperate for?
So I think elections are logical and emotive exercises. So you have some people who will always vote based on logic. For instance, I'm a single mother who needs childcare,
Yeah.
or who needs crashes where I go to work.
Yeah.
So if a candidate says, I'll legislate that, places of employment must provide these services for mothers, for instance, that's the kind I'm going to vote for. So you might vote for a candidate who is big on scholarships if you're a student, for instance. But there'll also be other people who are not really moved by the logic of the argument or the policy or plans or programs, and vote based on a vibe.
Yeah.
Whether that vibe is a sectional vibe or a religious vibe or whatever, you will have people that do not vote based on the logic that or arguments that candidates are putting out,
Yeah.
but on more emotional, more passionate, more passion-driven reasons, good or bad. In this instance, and I say it on almost every platform, we are seeing an unprecedented level of youth engagement for the first time in politics.
Yeah.
Most democracies, whether it's a third world country or developed nation,
Yeah.
you see a lot of youth apathy. Young people are not interested in politics. And we are seeing sort of like a reversal in Nigeria's case.
Yeah.
So it's good. It's a lot of noise. It's very loud on social media.
Yeah.
You would think, why, like I said, I'm an analyst, so you look at the numbers away from the noise.
Yeah.
You would think that the numbers with this PVC registration, for instance, because of all the noise, you would think that we'll be seeing record levels of PVC registration.
Yeah.
I think we saw about 12 million.
12, yeah. Barely 12 million.
So we had 12 million with online registration and traditional offline registration,
Yeah.
and all this noise. But in 2019, after 4 years of a very, very poor APC government, we had about 14 million PVC registrations without online aids, just manual registrations. So 4 years ago, without noise, we actually had more voter registering than we did now. So noise is good. It brings energy to the conversation.
Yeah.
But, it doesn't really alter, I don't think, the democratic outcomes of elections. What I hope I'll see is that young people use this noise to platform issues that matter to them. I talked about 45% youth unemployment. So I would hope that young people will be asking which of these candidates are going to create jobs. ASU is currently on strike. I would love to hear young people talk about which of these candidates, has shown a track record and appetite for education and for young people's education. So I would hate to see young people, just make this noise and not really use their voice, and the microphones and the platform they have now to push through or force candidates to adopt issues that are important to young people. Again, it's very easy for me to speak logically about what my candidate wants to do about education. It's unsustainable right now because Nigeria is financially broke. It's unsustainable for the federal government to fund all levels of education from primary to university levels. So his plan involves devolving powers, not just to the states, but also encouraging private sector participation. And so government's role will pull back to more of a regulatory role, but also then be able to invest in research and funding and scholarships for people who are unable to pay for their education at the tertiary level. So it's a plan that is workable, is actionable, and will actually give us more more positive educational outcomes. I speak, for instance, I'm from Edo State,
Okay.
and my state governor is doing something amazing. He rolled out a plan very similar to what Waziri Atiku tries to do. In Edo State, we call it the Edo Best.
Okay.
And, in almost 2 years now, we are seeing positive outcomes. Edo State is now the number one state in Nigeria from our WAEC results. And, so when we talk about, time plans to outcomes, I can speak to the PDP and I can speak to our candidates that, these are our plans and these are the results that our plans, will give.
Okay. So on a final note, some people feel that as much as the issues are very, very important that we address them, but in actuality, it's going to be a very difficult task in view of the piles of problem that we have on ground. That the next president, if I hear people say I pity the next Nigerian president, it might just be the worst ever for anyone who takes over from the APC because of what they will leave behind. What's your opinion on that? I mean, since you've spoken so excellently about Atiku Abubakar, would it be disappointing at the end of the day, or do you think it's somebody who can really captain the ship to a safe place for all of us at the end of the day?
So Nigeria's problems have grown so big that all you need is just the political will to address them.
Okay.
One such thing is the fuel subsidy problem.
Yes.
Nigeria is spending upwards of 4 trillion naira now. Next year, it's projected that we'll spend about 7 trillion naira, which is even more than our budget deficit.
Yes.
So we are going to be borrowing to pay for fuel consumption for the subsidy. We all know what's supposed to happen is the staged removal of the fuel subsidy, because Nigeria is bankrupt. We can't afford to spend that amount. The fuel subsidy that we're projecting is actually larger than than our education budget. So you ask yourself, which is more important to you? Is it to fund education, healthcare, and train your army and police, and tackle all these types of things, invest in agriculture? Or do you just want to spend this money? Again, I want to be clear, not on just a subsidy, it's a corruption tax. Because what happens when you subsidize fuel is that Nigeria's fuel becomes the cheapest in the West African sub-region. And people, first of all, don't import all this fuel. And fuel that gets into this country goes out of our borders. We have about 1,400 unmanned border crossings. So you get fuel into Nigeria, and it's actually more profitable to sell it on the black market or to sell it to our neighboring countries who will buy cheap fuel. So that's why I call it a corruption tax. But you just need a president who has said, look, our problems are large enough. We all know what the problems are, but who has the political will to push it through? Who is able to build elite consensus across the nation to say, look, everyone, these are the hard decisions we need to take. I need you to work with me. The only candidate who can work with the National Assembly, who can work with the leaders across all political, ethnic, religious divides is Atiku. Because he's the only one that spans from Zamfara to Bayelsa. He's literally the only person. So if anybody is truly serious about seeing a Nigeria that is prosperous, that is united, that is progressive, the only candidate that has plans is Atiku. And the only candidate who has the will and the political weight to push it through is also Atiku.
All right. Well, that's coming from Ose. He says Atiku is the only one who has the will and he can do it. I don't know what you think about that, but you can leave us comments and let's hear from you. Thank you, Ose, for making our time to talk with us. It was really interesting listening to you.
It was a pleasure.
All right. So that's how it's been on this episode. Join me next time. And don't forget, please subscribe so that you're able to get notices whenever we have a new episode on this podcast. It's the Statesman Podcast. My name is Swat. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time.